I find it very hard to trust somebody who is currently dysregulated because I am looking for my leader, for the person who is going to solve my problem, to come into the situation calm and having access to all of their resources. When we're dysregulated, we forget half the things that we know. And that is not the time that I want somebody solving a problem for me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I'm so glad you are here today. Today, my guest is Nataly Huff. She was actually on a previous episode in 2025, and I got such phenomenal feedback on her episode that I asked her to come back again and talk to me about executive presence and the stories we tell ourselves as we are building our leadership identity. She is amazing. She is just filled with so many metaphors and just describes things in such a way that it's easy to grasp that I know you are going to love this. She is a high performing transformational coach who works with all kinds of leaders in all sizes of organizations on understanding how they work using neuroscience backed methods. Nataly is an executive coach, the founder of Inspire Forward Coaching, and she uses neuroscience backed methods to help leaders develop authentic executive presence, build strategic capabilities, and create the kind of influence that boards and C suites take notice of. She's amazing. And I know you're going to love this episode because it's all about how you are showing up to the world. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Nataly. Welcome back, everyone. I have Nataly Huff as my guest once again. We had such a fabulous conversation the last time about triggers and fear and neurology of emotions that I wanted to have her back to do a deep dive into something else that she's very passionate about, and that is executive presence and how that leads into the stories that we tell about ourselves, both to ourselves and to others. So, Nataly, welcome back to Reflect Forward.
Thank you. I am very, very excited to be here. And yes, the reason why executive presence is another big passion of mine is because a lot of the people that I coach get this feedback. Great, you're doing really great work, but if you want to level up, you really need to level up your executive presence. We want to see more executive presence from you. And most of us have no idea what exactly that means or how do you work on it? How do I come and present myself more as an executive? So that's a conversation I have with my clients all the time. And it's a conversation that I think more people need to think about for themselves as well.
I love this topic. I've actually given this feedback to some CEOs of companies that I'm on the boards of. So before we jump in, just can you remind people a little bit about the work that you do so that ties it to this conversation and the work that you do on neuroscience and leadership?
Absolutely. My background comes from the corporate world. I've been in the corporate world for nearly 20 years. Been leading teams of many different sizes at the executive level until I started my own thing, at which point in time I started a practice called Inspire Forward Coaching. And in this practice, I very specifically focus on mid-career professionals or early executive professionals because this is where I think a lot of formative work can really happen. My foundations are based in neuroscience. So, if we can understand what is happening in our own brains, if we can understand what is happening in the brains of the people around us, we can bring the best of ourselves forward and we can bring out the best of the teams that we're working with.
Love it. Love it. All right. So let's jump into executive presence. For everybody who is wondering what the heck that is, can you explain it? Break it down for us.
This is the really annoying answer is that executive presence really depends on the executive and the people who are perceiving them. Because really what we're talking about is perception, is how you come across and how others see you. And for some people, executive presence might mean really calm, slow speech. And others, it might mean a lot of energy and a lot of domineering forward energy, right? So it can be different for everybody. But what it really means is that you are putting out signals that create trust in your audience. So think about this, right? You come into the room and you're running. You have some spinach in your teeth from the salad that you ate on the way up. You feel flustered and go, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry that I'm here so late. Okay, let's talk about this. I really want your money." Right? That whole experience is not really creating a lot of confidence in your audience because it feels like, wait, you can't even manage your own time. It feels like you are flustered and nervous and aren't sure what you're talking about. It also feels like you're trying to get out of the room faster. So there's a sense of why are you trying to get out of the room faster? You're sending signals of distrust, and your audience is looking for reasons to trust you. People really want to trust each other, but if we're thinking about how we decide on that, it really is almost subconscious and reactionary. So your natural executive presence is going to be one that fits your personality most, but you also need to understand the culture of the organization that you're coming into. So, what I would usually start with is having the person think about a topic that they're incredibly familiar with and incredibly passionate about, and thinking about what is it that you would be able to talk about with absolutely no preparation very, very comfortably. And who are the people you'd be able to talk to about it? And then think about how would you embody yourself physically, right? Are you a person who leans in? Are you a person who talks slowly? Are you a person whose voice is low and steady? Or are you a person who emotes a lot naturally? Because the other part that your audience is going to see is how natural and comfortable you are with your performance, so to speak, versus if you're trying to pretend to be something that you're actually not.
So this reminds me of a conversation I had with an author who was interviewing me for his book a few weeks ago. And he asked me, what are the leadership traits that every leader needs to be successful? And I said, I'm going to give you a really lame answer. And that is, it depends on the leader. You can't just check
Mhm.
it off and say, oh, everybody needs to have these things, with, I think, the exception of self awareness. I think without self awareness, it's hard to do anything to improve as a leader, to inspire people to follow you. But it really depends on the person. He was a little bit taken aback because I think he just wanted that checkbox. But I said, my example, the very best leaders I've had, who I have admired the most, who have made the biggest impact on me, lead nothing like I lead. They are not me. They don't have this vulnerability and this transparency, but I admired them because of the very specific things that they were good at and they brought into their leadership that helped me become a better employee, a better person, a better leader. And so I love that you answered it that way, because I do think people want that checkbox. Okay, if I do this, I have good executive presence, but that's not true. It really does
That's not
depend on who the person is. So, how do you advise people to, I don't know, run an audit to say, all right, how do I show up? And then how do I polish this to make sure that I'm being perceived the way I want to be perceived as a leader?
I'll add a little bit to your answer. There's not really a checklist of what people need, but there is a checklist, at least for the executive presence, of what they need to be perceived as. And trust was the one that I highlighted the most. If you want to be an executive, you want to be a leader, your team, your company, your partners need to trust you. Nobody follows a leader they don't trust. So it's the same thing for executive presence. You need to come in and you need to come across trustworthy. And that's where it comes back to the it depends question, because how do I come across trustworthy? You come across trustworthy by being authentic to yourself. So one of the things that I have people do is tap into, again, self awareness, as you talked about, to figure out their own values. What are the things that they feel strongest and most passionate and most comfortable and most aligned with, so that they can figure out how can they live within those values and bring themselves within those values during those conversations. And then what we'll usually do is we'll do a role play practice. We will have them talk to me as if I'm a leader, their leader, and have them talk about something that is definitely within that realm, that is within their values. And we'll have them do it for something that they're uncomfortable with. And then we'll look at them side by side and we'll look at the physiology of it. Because one of the things that we can really do is we can trick our own brains and can trick our own beliefs by embodying the persona that we're trying to portray. We're looking for that embodying that is natural to you. I talked about the example. Some people would really like to lean in and talk, while other people are more comfortable leaning back and relaxing. The common line there is the relaxed body posture. Your ears are not touching your shoulders. You're not fidgeting. You are within your body, but you can be leaning in or you can be leaning back. Either is fine. When you are asked a question to which you don't know the answer, do you start fidgeting? Or do you pause and hold the silence? Or do you externally process the question that you have been asked? Either one is fine, probably not the fidgeting one, but the whatever is natural to you. If you're an internal processor, it's okay to pause. How do you hold that silence? If you're an external processor, it's okay to talk through your thinking, but how do you do that without coming across panic? So finding the things that you value and then watching yourself in both situations, and then you start bringing that in and you practice one thing at a time. Pick the easiest one. Pausing before you answer is usually the one that people tend to start with, because if there's not enough executive presence in that particular moment, they want to rush to cover the silence rather than think through what they can bring to the conversation. So we'll start with, okay, pausing before you answer. Your practice for the next 2 weeks is take one deep breath before you answer a question. That's it. Start there. That one deep breath is going to calm your nervous system down, which is also already going to help. But usually that's where we'll start. Sometimes that's not the cause of the discrepancy, so we'll start somewhere else. But we'll start with those simple practices and you build them out as habits.
So I want to go back to embodiment, but I want to unpack a little bit what you just talked about nervous system regulation, because to me, that is everything. How we manage our lives, our emotions, and how we can grow comes through nervous system regulation. And I think so many people, they're just going, living in this hustle culture, feeling like I have to
Yes.
make decisions, move fast, perform, be the leader, that kind of leader, because that's what leadership is. And they're not in tune with what their nervous system is telling you. How important is being aware of your nervous system and being able to regulate it in the moment to executive presence?
It's everything, right? Again, it comes back to trust. I find it very hard to trust somebody who is currently dysregulated because I am looking for my leader, for the person who is going to solve my problem, to come into the situation calm and having access to all of their resources. When we're dysregulated, we forget half the things that we know. And that is not the time that I want somebody solving a problem for me. So it's exactly that same approach. It is very hard to trust somebody who's coming in dysregulated, who's coming in and is pushing you out of your own comfort zone, out of your own regulation. So, yes, finding the signs of your own dysregulation and having little tricks on how to bring yourself back down into regulation is incredibly important. We talked a little bit about the think, feel, do framework last time we talked. This is similar. Some of the things that people can do is truly physiological, finding something to play with their hands that they can feel in the palms of their hands so they can bring themselves to their present moment. Again, not getting chased by a bear, sitting in a conference room. It's fine. Another one is if you know it's going to be a particularly stressful conversation, bringing in sour candy and popping a sour candy in your mouth. That spike of, oh my God, I have to create a lot of saliva right now. There's absolutely no reason why I would be eating sour candy if I was running away from a bear. Okay, we can calm ourselves down. But breathing techniques are usually a lot more subtle. So if you are able to comfortably in a room, that will help significantly for you to calm your nervous system.
My trick is putting my feet on the floor. And my telltale sign of my nervous system amping up is I start to speak quickly. It's taken practice for me to recognize when my pace starts speeding up and be able to stop it in the moment. Okay, feel my feet on the ground and then take that deep breath. It is that tactile
Gotcha.
feeling of, okay, I'm grounded and I can calm myself down right now. And I always notice that when I take that deep breath and calm myself, people mirror that as well. So they're reflecting your executive presence when you are grounded and when you start to regulate your nervous system.
Yes, if you're making other people nervous, it's very hard for them to agree that whether or not you have executive presence, right? Calming yourself down is going to help others reflect it. I really love what you're talking about, putting your feet on the floor. Another one that I would have people sometimes do is feel their butt in the
Mm.
chair. Really focus the bottom of your legs and your own weight in the chair. It brings you in again to the kind of present moment. The other one that you talk about is fast speaking. Most people do this. Their voice gets a little higher and they speak a lot faster. And one of the ways to recognize this is all of a sudden if you're out of breath. Because when you're speaking fast, you're not having the time to inhale in between your words. If you find yourself out of breath, that's your sign that you're speaking too fast. Do whatever it is you need to do to take a breath and slow down the pace of your speech.
Great suggestions. Okay, so now let's go back to embodiment. And I think that this is going to tie very well to nervous system regulation. I have an example I want to share, but just in case people don't really understand what that means. So when you say you need to embody the type of executive presence that you want other people to experience, what does that mean exactly?
Okay, we can go many different ways, but I'll start with the simple example of the concept of dress for the job that you want. When you physically put on clothes that make you look like the person that you're trying to be, you're sending a message to yourself that you are worthy of being that person that you want to be and that you're already there. The other element, and this is probably the most interesting one, is that people are going to make a judgment about you automatically in the first couple of seconds that they see you. So the reason why you dress for the job that you want is they've already made a perception, and then their brains are going to look for confirmation of that perception in what you say. So again, if you're coming in, rushing, spinach in your teeth, oh my God, I'm so sorry, the perception that they have built, they're looking to confirm. And how others are reacting to you, you're also perceived. Regardless of what you're doing, even if you're trying to completely focus on yourself, this is just a natural communication skill of we're reading other people's body language and we're reacting to it. So if they're starting with a kind of a false perception of you, you are trying to counteract it and you're coming in from a deficit. So that's the very simple dress for the job that you want. What it really means is feeling your body in the role. Think of acting. When you have somebody who is trying to be a different person, they don't just say the words. They take on a slightly different attitude. They bring in a slightly different swagger. If somebody who is acting young or acting old, acting energetic or acting sad or acting happy, their body language, their physicality changes in the acting perspective. So again, going back to the perception that you're trying to build, you are communicating with every part of your body what kind of person you are in the room. And when you're communicating, you're not just communicating it externally, you're communicating it to yourself. I am using slow motions. I am confidently leaning in and telling you the story. I am feeling very confident in what I have to say. You're starting to build your own beliefs at the same time as you're building the beliefs of the people you're talking to.
So I'll give you a great example of a transformation I went through that has to do with executive presence. I received feedback that my leadership style felt erratic and that I moved so fast that people couldn't keep up. And I've shared this story lots of times. So this is not a new story, but what I needed to do was make sure that I was never going to be called erratic again. I could take ownership of the fact that I moved so fast. I spoke very quickly. I loved ideas. And so I said yes to every ideas and that it could feel chaotic to people. So even though it stung, I saw the truth in it. And so I decided in that moment that I wanted to be an unflappable leader. Freaking out never makes anything better. And even when I didn't feel like I
Never.
was freaking out, if somebody else perceiving me as freaking out, it was amping up their nervous systems. So I decided cool, calm, and collected was my mantra. And I embodied that type of leadership. I want to be an unflappable leader who is cool, calm, and collected in any situation. And I asked my team to hold me accountable when they started to see me get amped up about something to give me feedback of, hey, that was not cool, calm, and collected. I made it safe for them to be able to do it because I really wanted to change this about myself. I do not want to be a person who dysregulates people's nervous systems. I want to be a person who
Yes.
inspires people to live up to their full potential. And so I had to do nervous system regulation constantly because I moved quickly, I spoke quickly, I was so driven and so ambitious that it was hard for people to keep up. I experienced that as my own pace, right? And thought that's how everybody else operated. And then I had this realization of, no, that's not actually the case. So I just practiced. There was always repetitions of I am a cool, calm, and collected leader. And I embodied that. What would a cool, calm, and collected leader do right now? Well, they wouldn't freak out. They would ask questions. They would take time to make a thoughtful decision. They would analyze the opportunity against the strategy to say, where does this fit in? And so I slowly made those changes over that next year. And it helped me get through some really difficult times. We had a hack, then COVID, and I had to be the rock for my employees. I couldn't freak out. So that is how I embodied it. And I just believed I am a cool, calm, and collected leader. I am unflappable. And I would ask myself, what is the behavior that this type of leader would enact right now? And am I doing it?
So exactly what you're talking about, right? The concept is thinking through character work. Again, we're going to go back to the acting metaphor. Thinking through what the leader that you want to be perceived as would do in that situation. How would they come to this meeting? How would they ask that question? We're not talking about changing your own persona completely, right? If you're never going to be a person who doesn't laugh at a joke because you are so cool, calm, and collected, you don't have to not laugh at the joke. There's limits to what you can do because it still needs to be authentic. But within those limits of your own persona and your own self, how would a cool, calm, and collected Nataly behave in that situation? One of the journaling prompts that I recommend for people is to think through what in their day might bring them stress before the day starts. And then think through, now, if that happens, what would the version of myself that I want, like the one that has my values, my truth, and my vision, how would that person react? How do I want to bring myself to that situation so that in a calm environment before the stressful situation happened, you've already practiced it in your brain of how you want to behave and how you want to be. So the work that you were doing, okay, what would a calm and collected Kerry do in this particular moment is exactly that. You are practicing and you are training your brain to be exactly that way when you need it.
Yeah, the repetitions matter. Catching yourself in the moment is the most powerful way to change the behavior instead of letting yourself just go through it without much
Mm-hmm.
presence and awareness. Okay, I'm doing it again. Slow my breathing down, pause, ask for a few minutes, ask for a day, whatever you need to do to calm your nervous system in a way that allows you to show up the way that you want it to be, whether that's cool, calm, and collected, or whatever your mantra is. I think that's so powerful because it's in those moments of stress where our real leadership comes out. We have to practice being the kind of leader that we want to be when those moments of stress come, because it's easy to be cool, calm, and collected when there's nothing going on. But now all of a sudden the shit hits the fan. And how am I going to show up? Have I put in the repetitions? Have I caught myself enough in those moments where I did feel myself getting amped up or did feel myself going into that same pattern that I want to change? And did I make a different choice going forward?
This is actually where, if your organization is working with some sort of a coaching program, or maybe your own internal team is trained on doing something like this, but with a proper
Yeah.
360, having really good reflection on what you are like during times of stress is incredibly eye opening because we have our own concepts of, okay, here's what happens when bad things happen. And then we have the perceptions of people who are working for us, who are working with us, and who we're working for. We're very unreliable narrators of our own story, just completely unreliable. But having that external
Yeah.
feedback and really understanding, okay, which of your resources go away during stress will tell you which resources you need to strengthen, which habits you need to build, and which areas you need to focus because we oftentimes overuse our strengths in the time of stress. And we really very easily let go of our more newly acquired skills.
So I love the concept of a 360, and many organizations do it, but many don't. So if a person works within an organization that they don't have a formal 360 process, how can they go about soliciting this type of feedback from their peers or their direct reports in a way that makes it feel safe for those people to actually give them feedback on their executive presence, especially under stress?
Part of it is opening yourself up to the conversation and making sure that you are willing to listen to the feedback rather than trying to argue the feedback. So, whenever you go to your counterparts, wherever they are on the corporate ladder, when you come into it truly open to hearing what people have to say versus coming in and bracing for combat, that energy comes through in the conversation. So if you want true feedback, honest feedback, make sure you're coming into it with a really open heart. If you are one of those people that tends to get defensive, maybe you can give yourself the guidance of saying, I will not try to have a conversation about it. I will take it, and my answer will be, let me think about it and come back to you so that you have some time on your own to process all the feelings you have about the feedback you might be receiving. So that's one part. The other part is there's actually tools out there. There's personality profile tools that are designed to find out which strengths you lean on and which strengths you lean away from in stressful situations. So if you don't necessarily work in a large enough environment where you can get that feedback, or maybe you're new enough in that environment that you're not familiar with it, there's external tools you can use. Those are very powerful, but it is a lot more useful to hear the specific words in the specific situations from the people around you. So I would generally recommend starting with the people around you and coming in and asking for help. And the question usually is, I'm trying to improve how I handle stressful situations. And I would love to hear from an external perspective, what tendencies do I have when things blow up that are helpful and that are not? And just sit back and listen.
Yeah, that's great advice. I love what you talk about with being defensive, because I think that that's the natural reaction for most people, even if they don't outwardly express it. And I was actually talking to one of my employees today about mindset, and I shared with him the concept of, we get to choose how we take something and what we want to make of it. We are creating our reality. Situations get put in front of us, and we humans want to assign meaning to it. This is good. This is bad. This is because I screwed up. This is because I did something well. And if you drop that and you say, okay, this is the experience that is in front of me right now in this moment, what am I going to do with it? It's so powerful. And I received some feedback on ways to improve a keynote, and it brushed up against my lifelong wound of, I'm not good enough. I didn't perform the way I wanted to perform. And that wasn't true. The feedback, like, it was amazing. And there's these few tweaks that you could do to make it even better. In that moment, I recognized this is brushing up against my wound. I don't need to protect and defend. I don't need to overperform. What I need to do is just take it as information and say, what do I want to do with this information going forward? Well, I want to be a TED Talk keynote speaker. So I'm going to take the feedback from this person and I'm going to utilize it to help me leapfrog forward. I think that this is going to tie well into this next conversation that we have about the story you tell yourself about yourself, to yourself and to others. But you can
Yeah.
choose to think of it differently. Yes, you can acknowledge that it hurts and that brushes up against my insecurities. And I don't have to let that dictate my life going forward. I can really hear what's being said and use it to create the reality that I want. And that is to have better executive presence so that I'm a leader who people want to follow and I create more success for myself and so on. I'm glad you touched on that, because I do think that we can tell ourselves any story we want about the
Mhm,
feedback that we might get from others on our executive presence or on anything in
mhm.
life, and either protect and defend and go lick our wounds, or go, wow, that's really great. And I'm going to select the reality that that makes me an even better person, leader, speaker, whatever it is you're getting feedback on.
Here's the thing that most people forget is that you actually don't have to accept the feedback you're given. You truly, within your heart, disagree with what is being said, or if you don't necessarily respect the opinion of the person that gave you that feedback, you can let it go.
Yeah.
So, whenever feedback comes your way, you have this option to accept it or let it go. And if you do accept it, you don't have to accept all of it, right?
Yes.
There could be some of those things that are touching parts of your heart that you're not quite ready to deal with. Put that aside, dig a little further, see what else you can accept and implement right away. You might come back to that little piece of feedback 3 years later when you're ready. It'll still be there. but it's completely up to you how much of it you take in and how much of it you let roll off your shoulders.
And we also apply more narrative to feedback than what was actually given. So my erratic feedback immediately was, this person just told me I'm not a good leader. In fact, that is not what this person told me. Just told me
Mhm.
that me moving really fast and speaking quickly and passionately seemed aggressive, and that it was impacting how others were reacting to me because of it. He did not say you are a bad leader. I turned it into that. Just like this
Mhm.
person did not say you are a bad keynote speaker. In fact, she said just the opposite. It was amazing. And here are a few things that you can do to be even better, and brushing up against that insecurity that I have of I didn't perform well and I need to perform well. That little thought of, see, I'm just not that good. That is not what she said. And so I think that's a really important
That's
discernment in this whole conversation about accepting feedback as you're looking to grow, is that oftentimes we turn it into a bigger story about ourselves than what it actually is.
So perfect segue. Let's talk about stories
Yes.
because we tell ourselves stories all the time. We tell other people stories all the time. We need stories to make sense of the world. And we are building those stories on incomplete information all the time. The context that I have in my head is not the context that you have in your head, is not the context that they have in their heads. So we're trying to all piece this together based on our own context. That doesn't mean our stories are true. That doesn't mean our stories are helpful. So, one of the things that we talk about a lot with clients is, what is your story? Whether it is in the situation of somebody gave me feedback and it really hurt my feelings. Okay, let's dig through and figure out what the story you're telling yourself about that feedback. Or what is the story that you want to bring to the situation? So, again, if we think again about the executive presence, as somebody who has executive presence, who has confidence, who has the ability to build trust within the first 2 minutes of conversation, you need to be able to tell your story. And that story needs to be both concise and impactful and needs to resonate with the person that you're speaking to. But we become blind to the truth of our own story. We don't necessarily look at ourselves in the mirror and go, well, remember when you were 5 years old and you fell off that bicycle and you got right back up? That was amazing. That was 30, 40 years ago. I don't remember that moment, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't part of your story. Right? So, one of the things that is incredibly impactful is actually talking through your story with somebody and having them reflect it back to you. If you've ever had the experience of working with a professional resume coach, that is an incredibly powerful experience because they will sit with you for 2 hours and just ask you questions about what you did, why you did it, what it looked like, what it sounded like, what it delivered, and starts to bring out all of these amazing things that you've done in your career that you completely forgot about and makes you feel incredible because you don't think about the things that you have already done, things that are creating your context and the things that are making you as good at what you are as you are today. And so that concept of really having the awareness and the ability to look at yourself through somebody else's eyes is really the first step in figuring out, how do you tell a more complete story? Because your identity is not your current job. You are so much more than that, right? Your current title, your current project is not you. It's like a tiny little sliver of you. What you're able to bring to this current job that you're interviewing for, or this current project that you're trying to get on, is not what you're doing today. It's everything that you've built up to today. So, how do you turn that into a 45-second spiel that really gives somebody a good understanding of what you're able to bring to the equation? Again, answer is usually it depends. It's unique to a person. But this is once again something that requires self awareness, usually engaging with other people around you, and figuring out what story you actually want to tell. Because it's very easy to look back at your entire life and just look at all of the mistakes, just look at all of the failures, just look at all of the places where you didn't quite measure up to what you wanted to accomplish. And you can tell that story. It's not going to get you very far,
Yeah.
but you can tell that story. Or you can look at all of the lessons learned from those mistakes and all of the things that you have accomplished and all the times that you have built resilience and resourcefulness. And you can tell that story. Completely different story. And when you say that story, whether it's in networking events, when you're meeting other executives in a company, during interviews, the more you say it out loud, the more you believe it yourself.
Yes.
And the more you start to embody that person whose story you're telling.
It's interesting that we often lead with our jobs, our titles, when people ask us about ourselves. And when I had that awareness, I wanted to change that because we can over identify with our roles. And I don't want to over identify with being the CEO because someday I'm going to have to let that go. And I don't want to have this identity death or ego death of, oh my God, who am I now that I'm not a CEO? No, I'm so much more than that. Those are just 3 letters behind my name. I'm a
Yeah.
human being trying to figure out how to live a inspired life, learning who I am, healing my wounds, expanding consciousness, and hopefully impacting those around me in a positive way. So it has a ripple effect long after people have no idea my name anymore. So I've really started practicing saying other things besides, oh, I'm the CEO of Stone Age. What are some tips that you have for people to start to build their story with how they want to show up with people that isn't just so focused on this is my job or this is my family? It really gets to the essence of not what you do, but who you are and who you be.
Yes. Again, there's help for this. It's a service that I offer. It's a service that other people offer that help you go through it because it's a lot easier to do it with a mirror, with a well meaning, well intentioned perspective that is there to just look for the amazing in you and bring it out and reflect it. That is fantastic and that is helpful. You can do this with a friend. You can do this if you have somebody in your life that also just happens to be a really fantastic writer. It is really fun to do it with them and, pay them with a dinner, pay them with whatever it is that you do together as a way to repay the amazing service that they're about to do. If for whatever reason you want to do this on your own, think about what got you here. All right. And why are you good at what you do today? So if you are a CEO right now, did you always want to be a CEO? When did you decide you wanted to be a CEO? What was the first step towards that direction? Was the first step the right step or was that a learning step? So if you really look back at the length of your journey and see how it comes together, then think about where you want it to be because any story has a trajectory.
Yes.
You never have a story that starts here and then pivots this way. It's usually not a good story that most people don't like. So if you think about here's my path up to here, where do I want to go from here? Then you can figure out which elements you pick up so that the trajectory of the story leads in the direction of where you want to be.
Well, those stories we tell ourselves to ourselves and to others are so important because you're right. It is reinforcing identity. And our identity is the life that we're creating. The universe is giving us not always what we want, what we wish for, what
Mhm.
we visualize, but what we believe about ourselves, which is ultimately our identity. And we can change that. I've changed my identity multiple times. It took hitting rock bottom in 2006 for me to say, okay, I am not going to be a drug abuser. I am going to live a successful life. And what do I have to do to embody this different identity? And so it is 100% possible. And it isn't all about changing who you are at the core, all of those great things that you bring with your talent, your skills, and the bright parts of your personality. It is saying, okay, I don't like where I am right now, whether it's from an executive presence or you feel stuck or you're trying to get over something like substance abuse or
Uh-huh.
whatever our dopamine hit addiction is, you can do it through really understanding the story that you tell yourself now and the story that you want to tell about yourself in the future.
We are incredibly multifaceted
Yes.
creatures. On any different person, there can be 1,000 stories
Yeah.
that you could tell. And it's okay to have multiple versions of your story depending on which side you want to bring towards the sun. I think it's really healthy to acknowledge that every single one of us has a dark story
Yeah.
and could have a dark past. And we all struggle with our own demons, whatever demons they may be, whether they're our own or ones that have been handed to us. It's okay to have all of those things. It's about what you do as the next step. And even if you're just taking the very first step on the journey to where you want to be. All of your backstory is still going to help you. No matter what your backstory is, there's going to be elements of that that are going to help you through on that journey, even if you're just started.
Yeah, I love it. Such great advice. Okay, so I've asked you about the meaning of reflect forward in your previous episode, but I would love to get your thoughts on this through this lens of executive presence and the stories we tell ourselves. How can you use the power of reflecting forward to really help you understand how you're showing up and to change how you're showing up if you need to?
Again, I guess this is going to be my metaphor episode, is just like a mirror, right? So if we're thinking of reflection in terms of the mirror, how you position the mirror is going to change how you shine the light. Just like when a light hits, you can adjust the mirror to point it this way or this way. Just like you can turn a mirror to show this tree or maybe a sweater that's hanging out somewhere on the ground, right? This is all about what you choose to reflect from what's coming in to where you want to go. So I think in terms of identity, in terms of stories, in terms of executive presence, how you position yourself and how you turn yourself, the habits that you bring, the self that you embody is going to change the direction of where you move.
Thank you. Beautifully put. All right. So, once again, how can people find you if they want to learn more about you, work with you, follow you on social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on TikTok. And my website is www.inspire-forward.com. I'm happy to talk to anybody in all of those places. One of my favorite things is getting to know people one-on-one. So if you have questions, if you like what you heard, or if you disagree with what you heard, reach out. Let's talk.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show. I just had such a fun conversation. And this one was just as exceptional as the first one. You're filled with so much great advice and insights and metaphors that help people understand this hard work of identity creation and neuroscience and understanding ourselves better. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I loved it.
Wonderful. All right, hang tight, everybody. I'll be right back. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that interview and got lots of key takeaways and nuggets of information on how you can improve your executive presence and create that story you are telling about yourself to yourself and to others. I will also include a link to her previous episode from 2025, where we did a deep dive into the neuroscience of leadership and how we can manage our triggers so that we can lead more effectively. With that, I will leave you for your day. If you think that someone could use this information on executive presence, please share this episode with them. And if you haven't yet, head over to YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to Reflect Forward. Leave me a review, drop me a comment. I love hearing from you, and I appreciate you all so much. We will see you next week. Take care.